I have been observing greenskin organizational structures for 32 years. This began as assignment, evolved into obsession, and has now become the only thing preventing complete dissolution of what remains of my consciousness. My designation was once Tech Adept Meteorus Cole, attached to the Ordo Xenos research facility on Gorda Prime. I remember the temperature inside the observation chamber, 17 degrees Celsius, maintained precisely to preserve the cogitator banks that processed xenological data. The air tasted of recycled atmosphere and sacred machine oils. My augmetic left eye had been calibrated specifically for enhanced visual data capture. I could observe at magnifications up to 40 times normal human capacity. Useful for studying specimens, less useful for maintaining the illusion that I was still primarily human rather than data processing equipment wrapped in diminishing biological components. I was 29 when I first encountered the subject who would dominate the next 3 decades of my existence. The Ork, who the Orders designated Subject Gamma 77, though his species knew him by a name that translated approximately as Urgok the Unbreakable. Linguistic analysis of greenskin vocalizations is imprecise. Their communication operates on frequencies and tonal patterns that human phonetics struggle to replicate. But Urgok will serve as sufficient designation for record-keeping purposes. They brought him to our facility in Stasis, captured during an Imperial Guard operation on Valkor's world. The engagement had required 3 regiments and resulted in 41% casualties before the Orks were driven back into the wastes. Urgok had been found beneath a collapsed bunker, unconscious from trauma, but alive. Unusual. Most Ork leadership died rather than fell, but the bunker collapse had been structural failure, not combat defeat. Pure chance. He was extracted, placed in containment, transported to our facility for study. I remember the moment they activated the observation chamber. Urgok measured 2.7 meters in height. Mass estimated at 340 kilograms. Musculature overdeveloped to the point of grotesque, if human proportions can even apply to Xenos physiology. His skin was a deep green, darker than most specimens, scarred extensively. I counted 73 visible scars across his torso and arms alone. Each scar represented survived trauma. Orks healed with remarkable efficiency. These scars had been significant enough to leave permanent tissue damage despite their regenerative capabilities. His jaw structure was pronounced, lower canines extending upward past his upper lip, even when his mouth was closed. His eyes were small, red, set deep beneath a heavy brow ridge. He wore minimal clothing. Rough hide and scrap metal formed into something approximating armor. Most Ork Warbosses decorated themselves extensively with trophies and status symbols. Urgok wore almost nothing. This suggested either extreme confidence or complete disinterest in display hierarchy. I was assigned as primary observer. My function was to monitor his behavior, log all data, and provide analysis to the senior magos overseeing xenological research. Standard procedure. I had performed similar observation duties for 17 other Xeno specimens over my 6 years at the facility. This assignment appeared unremarkable. I did not anticipate spending the next 32 years watching him. The observation chamber was designed for permanent containment. Reinforced ceramite walls 3 meters thick. Molecular bonding at structural level rendered them effectively indestructible by anything short of orbital bombardment. The chamber measured 20 meters by 15 meters, sufficient space to observe specimen behavior while maintaining secure containment. Automated feeding systems delivered appropriate nutrition. Waste removal was handled through sealed extraction ports. Environmental controls maintained survivable conditions. The chamber contained everything necessary to keep a specimen alive indefinitely, while preventing any possibility of escape. One wall was transparent armor glass, two-way visual access. The specimen could not see through from their side. We observed from the monitoring station, recording everything. Urgok remained motionless for the first 73 hours after awakening. He sat against the far wall, legs crossed, arms resting on his knees. His eyes were open. He breathed. He lived. But he performed no other actions, did not explore the chamber, did not test the walls, did not vocalize, simply sat. Catatonic response to captivity. My supervisor, Magos Drentul, concluded. The specimen's psychological framework cannot process the captivity situation. Irreversible mental degradation likely. Continue observation, but reduce priority. It will expire within the month. I logged his assessment. Continued observation as instructed. On hour 87, Urgok moved. He stood, walked to the center of the chamber, and began a sequence of physical exercises. Precise, controlled movements, stretches, strikes at empty air, repetitive motion patterns that resembled combat training. He continued this for 4 hours. Then he returned to a seated position against the wall and resumed motionlessness. I archived the data. Noted the deviation from predicted catatonic behavior. Urgok was not mentally degraded. He was thinking, processing, adapting to a situation with methodical discipline completely inconsistent with standard Ork behavioral models. The pattern repeated daily. 87 hours of motionlessness, 4 hours of physical training, return to stillness, exact timing, precise repetition. I monitored him continuously, sleeping in 4-hour intervals when my augmetic systems required minimal rest. I did not want to miss any behavioral deviation. 3 weeks into observation, Urgok spoke. Not to himself, not random vocalization. He spoke directly to the armor glass wall, to the observation station he could not see through but clearly knew was there. I know you watch, he said. His voice was deep, guttural, but the low Gothic was comprehensible. Many Orcs learned enough Imperial language through combat exposure. I know you study. I let you. For now. I recorded the statement, analyzed the implications. He was aware of observation, accepted it. The phrase, "for now," suggested he considered his captivity temporary. Delusion, most likely. The chamber was escape-proof, but his calm certainty was notable. I found myself responding, though procedure did not require it. I activated the external speaker system. You are contained for research purposes. Your cooperation will be noted in records. Urgok's head tilted slightly, processing my words. Then he smiled. Orcs smiling is disturbing. Too many teeth, wrong proportions. The expression contains threat even when intended as amusement. You think walls hold me, he said. They don't, but I stay because I choose. When I choose different, walls won't matter. He returned to his seated position, did not speak again for 6 days. I reported the exchange to Magos Drentul. He dismissed it as Xenos bravado, psychological defense mechanism against the reality of permanent captivity. I logged his assessment and continued observation, though I found myself uncertain. Urgok's behavior did not match any established Ork psychological patterns. Most Orks in captivity became violent, attempting escape through brute force until they exhausted themselves. Or they degraded rapidly, their biology apparently requiring combat stimulus to maintain psychological cohesion. Urgok did neither. He simply waited. Weeks became months. The observation routine remained consistent. Urgok trained, rested, occasionally spoke brief statements about his eventual departure. I monitored and logged. The data accumulated into terabytes of recorded behavior. Patterns emerged. He was maintaining combat readiness. The training regimen never varied. He was preparing for something, not escape. He made no attempts to test the walls or identify weaknesses. He was preparing to return to war, wherever, whenever. He held absolute certainty that opportunity would arrive. 6 months into containment, supply issues disrupted our facility operations. Administrative logistics failures resulted in delayed shipments. Non-critical systems were placed on reduced power to maintain essential containment and life support. The observation chamber's feeding system malfunctioned. Urgok received no food for 11 days. I monitored his response. He showed no distress, no weakening. He continued his training regimen without alteration. Ork biology is remarkably resilient, but 11 days without food should have produced measurable degradation. Urgok appeared completely unaffected. On day 12, feeding systems were restored. Urgok consumed the provided rations, then resumed his routine as though nothing had occurred. "Your kind is weak," he said to the armor glass that evening. "You need supplies, schedules, systems. I need only war. Everything else is just waiting." I found myself asking, "What are you waiting for?" He looked directly at where I sat, though he could not possibly see through the treated armor glass. "My Waaagh, it comes. Always comes. War finds Urgok. Urgok never waits long." His certainty was absolute. Delusional, I logged. But I continued monitoring with increased attention. Something about his confidence disturbed me. He knew something I did not, or believed he knew. Either option warranted investigation. At month 9, I began deeper analysis of Urgok's background. Combat records from Valkor's world, historical data about his previous engagements, intelligence reports from guard units who had encountered his forces. The data painted unexpected pictures. Urgok had led his war for 18 years before his capture. 18 years. Ork Warboss leadership duration averaged between 2 and 4 years before they were killed by rivals or died in combat. Urgok had maintained control more than 4 times the expected duration. His forces had grown to an estimated 80,000 orcs at peak strength. He had conquered 7 imperial worlds before being driven back. More significantly, intelligence identified 47 documented challenges to his leadership during those 18 years. Internal Ork challenges, subordinates attempting to kill him and assume command. Standard greenskin hierarchy enforcement. Of those 47 challenges, Urgok had killed all 47 challengers. Personal combat. No assists. Every threat to his authority had been eliminated directly and violently. I processed this data against standard Ork behavioral models. Leadership challenges were constant in their society. War bosses faced daily tests of their strength and authority. Most eventually lost. Age, injury, simple bad luck. Something eventually allowed a younger, stronger Ork to kill them and take control. natural selection operating at maximum efficiency. Only the strongest led, and only temporarily. Urgok had broken the pattern. 18 years of uncontested dominance. He had not been stronger than all challengers. Impossible. But he had been smart enough to kill them all anyway. I shared my findings with Magos Drentol. He reviewed the data with interest. The specimen represents an outlier, he concluded. Abnormal intelligence for his species. This makes him valuable for study. Continue detailed observation. I want behavioral analysis correlating his tactical intelligence with physical responses. We may learn exploitable weaknesses in Ork command structures. I continued observation with new focus, watching not just what Urgok did, but why. Analyzing his training patterns for tactical thinking, his speech for psychological framework, his stillness for what it revealed about patience and planning. Year 2 of containment began. Urgok's routine remained unchanged. He trained, he waited, he occasionally spoke. "You study orcs," he said one day during my monitoring shift. "You want to know how we work. I tell you simple truth. We work through strength. Strongest leads. Always." I engaged the speaker. "You led for 18 years. Were you strongest for all that time?" His smile returned. Teeth and threat. "Strongest enough. Also smartest. Smart is strength humans don't count. I count. I use." "Explain," I said. "Research directive. Gather data through direct interaction when specimen is communicative." Urgok stood, began his training movements while speaking. "Ork sees big boss. Ork thinks I kill boss. I become boss. Simple. Stupid. I let them think. Then I kill them where everyone sees. Show strength. Show what happens when you challenge Urgok. After enough dead, fewer challenge. After enough years, only the truly stupid challenge. And stupid dies fast. You maintained control through intimidation and example," I said, processing his explanation against known Ork psychological patterns. Demonstrating cost of challenge discouraged challenges. "Close," Urgok said. "But not just fear, respect. Orks follow strong boss to good fights. I gave good fights, best fights, conquered worlds, killed thousands. My Waaagh grew because I led to glory. They followed because I won. Challenging me meant leaving winning side. Stupid trade." I archived this exchange. The psychological complexity was notable. Urgok understood not just violence, but motivation. He had maintained power through combination of demonstrated strength, strategic success, and calculated brutality. He was not simply the strongest, he was the most complete implementation of Ork leadership principles. "You said you led to good fights," I said. "Is captivity not defeat? Has your Waaagh abandoned you?" Urgok stopped training, turned to face the armor glass directly. "Waaagh never abandons. Waaagh finds. Eventually. Until then, Urgok trains. Urgok waits. Urgok will lead again." His certainty remained absolute. 2 years of containment had not diminished it. I found this psychologically fascinating. Human prisoners degraded, lost hope. Urgok appeared incapable of losing hope because he did not operate on hope. He operated on certainty. He would lead again because that was his function. The universe would provide opportunity because the universe required war, and war required leaders. This was not delusion. This was fundamental worldview. Urgok existed to make war. Captivity was temporary pause, not permanent condition. He did not need hope. He simply waited for reality to reassert proper conditions. I began spending more time at the observation station. My assigned monitoring duties required only 6 hours daily. I found myself extending this to 12, then 16. I slept at the station, ate at the console. Other research duties were neglected. Magos Drentel noted this in my personnel file, warned me against excessive focus on single specimen. I acknowledged his concern and changed nothing. I was learning something, not just about orcs, about leadership, about will, about what it meant to know your purpose so completely that external circumstances became irrelevant. At year 3, I asked Urgok a question that violated research protocols. "Do you ever doubt?" He was in his meditation position, eyes closed. He opened them, focused on the wall. "Doubt is human weakness. Orcs don't doubt. Orcs know. I know I am Warboss, strongest, best, born to lead Waaagh. This is truth like gravity is truth. I don't doubt gravity. I don't doubt Urgok." "But you lost," I said. "You were captured. Your Waaagh was scattered. These are facts. Battle lost. War continues. I was strongest for 18 years. I will be strongest again. One defeat does not unmake what I am." He paused. "You doubt. I hear it. You doubt everything. Yourself most. That is why you watch me, looking for certainty you don't have." I did not respond. Could not respond. He had identified something I had not consciously recognized. I was 25 years into augmentation progression. My body was 63% mechanical. My thoughts were increasingly processed through cogitator assistance. I existed in the space between human and machine, belonging fully to neither. Doubt was constant. About my purpose, my identity, my future. Urgok possessed no doubt whatsoever. He knew exactly what he was. This knowledge provided armor against psychological degradation that no amount of mental conditioning could replicate. "You are correct," I said eventually. "I doubt constantly." "Then stop," Urgok said. "Decide what you are. Be that. Doubt ends." Simple advice. Impossible implementation, but I archived it nonetheless. Year 4 brought changes to facility operations. Budget reductions resulted in staff reassignments. Magos Drentel was transferred to another research station. My direct supervision ended. I became the senior researcher by default, responsible for my own observation protocols. I continued monitoring Urgok without interruption. No other specimens received significant attention. My focus had narrowed to single subject. I barely noticed when I stopped eating regularly. My augmetic systems provided sufficient energy. Biological requirements were minimal. Sleep reduced to 3 hours per night. I monitored, logged, analyzed. Urgok trained, waited, occasionally spoke. The routine became meditative. Purpose achieved through pure repetition. At year 6, I asked him about the challenges he had faced, the 47 attempts on his leadership. He responded with detailed accounts. I recorded everything, though these sessions were no longer official research. They were simply conversation. He would describe a challenger, their size, their tactics, their motivation. Then he would describe killing them. Efficient, brutal, public executions designed to reinforce his dominance while demonstrating the cost of failure. "Nazgrot challenged in front of gathered mob," he said during one session. "Big orc, strong, fast, thought speed and strength enough. I let him attack first, dodged, made him look slow, made him look weak. Then I broke his arm, showed everyone I could have killed him first strike but chose to humiliate instead. Then I killed him, mob-chaired. No challenges for 3 months after." "Psychological warfare," I said. "You weaponized the executions themselves." Humans make simple things complicated words, Urgok said. I just killed good. Killed so good others scared to try. Year 8 introduced the first significant incident since containment began. A Waaagh attacked Gorda Prime, not Urgok's former forces. Different orcs, unrelated, but they breached planetary defenses and engaged our facility's security. I watched the battle through external monitors, thousands of greenskins throwing themselves at our fortifications. They died in vast numbers. Our defenses held. Barely. Urgok heard the combat. The chamber was soundproofed, but vibrations transmitted through structure. He stood at attention, head tilted, listening to distant explosions. Waaagh is close, he said. Good. Time approaches. You're Waaagh? I asked. Any Waaagh. Orcs find orcs. Eventually I rejoin war. This I know. The attack was repelled. Our facility survived. Urgok returned to his routine. But something had changed. His certainty had been partially validated. War had come within kilometers of his position. He had not been wrong to wait. Year 12 marked the midpoint of my observation. I was 39 years old chronologically, biologically indeterminate. The augmentation had progressed. I was 78% mechanical now. My thoughts processed with machine efficiency. Emotional response had degraded to background noise. I observed Urgok with perfect clinical detachment, yet I spent every waking moment monitoring him. This was not research, I understood this. This was attachment, the only attachment I retained. He had become the center point around which my existence orbited. Not because I admired him, not because I respected what he represented, but because he was constant, unchanging, certain. In a universe of entropy and doubt, Urgok remained exactly what he had always been. He had become my primary reference point for stability. The thought disturbed me when I allowed myself to process it fully. I was a servant of the Omnissiah. My purpose was knowledge acquisition in service to the machine god. Instead, I had fixated on a single Xeno specimen, learning nothing that advanced Mechanicus objectives, accumulating data that served no function beyond my own psychological need. I was complicit in my own degradation. I could have requested transfer, could have redirected focus. I chose not to. I chose to continue observation because stopping would mean confronting the absence of purpose that waited beyond Urgok's chamber. Better to watch him, better to maintain routine, better to exist in the narrow space where my function remained clearly defined. At year 15, Urgok said something that I have replayed in my archive 7,423 times since. He was sitting in his meditation position. I was running system diagnostics on observation equipment. The silence was comfortable. Then he spoke. "You are dying," he said. I stopped the diagnostic routine. "Explain." "You stop being human, become more machine. Eventually nothing remains but machine that remembers human. That is death. Slow death, but death." "The Omnissiah teaches that flesh is weak," I said. "Standard Mechanicus doctrine. Augmentation is improvement, enhancement, ascension toward machine perfection." "You believe that?" I process the question. I perform the rituals because the rituals are required. Belief is not necessary for function. "Then you already dead," Urgok said. "You function, but you don't live. Living requires purpose that matters to you, not purpose given by others. Your purpose now is watching Urgok. That is not enough. not purpose that sustains. You know this. I did know this, had known for years, continued anyway because continuation was easier than confronting alternatives. What is your purpose? I asked. Lead Waaagh, make war, be strongest, die eventually to someone stronger. This is Ork purpose. This is my purpose. I believe it, I live it. When I die, I will have been what I was meant to be. You will stop functioning one day. Will you have been what you were meant to be? I had no answer. I deactivated the speaker and sat in silence while Urgok returned to his training. At year 18, I committed my complicity moment. The decision that made me instrument of the system I had thought I was merely observing. Another tech adept was assigned to the facility. Younger, less augmented. He reviewed my research files on Urgok and determined the observation had produced no valuable data for 18 years. He recommended termination of the specimen and reallocation of resources to other projects. I received the recommendation through official channels. Standard procedure required my approval as senior researcher. Termination would be humane. Chemical compound introduced through feeding system. Urgok would lose consciousness within minutes, expire within the hour. Painless, efficient, proper resource management. I held the authorization data slate for 6 hours. I could approve with a single confirmation input, or I could deny. Approving meant losing the only constant in my existence. Denying meant perpetuating observation that served no research purpose. Both options were indefensible. Both options were necessary. I denied the termination request. Logged justification as ongoing behavioral observation reveals unprecedented Ork psychological resilience warranting continued study. False justification. The real reason was that I could not tolerate his absence. I'd watched him for 18 years. He had become the structure supporting my continued function. Without him, I would face the emptiness I had avoided confronting. I was using institutional resources to maintain my own psychological stability. I was complicit in the system's inefficiency. I was choosing personal need over mechanicus objectives. I processed this recognition and changed nothing. Urgok continued his routine. I continued observation. The machine continued operation. At year 20, I asked him about death. You said you will die eventually to someone stronger, I said. Does this concern you? No, Urgok said. Death is proper end for Warboss. Means I became weak. Means younger, stronger Ork takes leadership. Waaagh continues. This is correct. This is how it works. You have no desire to avoid death, to continue indefinitely. Continuing after strength fades. Urgok made a sound I had learned to recognize as Ork laughter. That is not life. That is you, still functioning when you should have stopped. I am not you. When I'm no longer strongest, I die. Someone better takes my place. War continues. Purpose fulfilled. He understood his own mortality with complete acceptance. Saw his eventual death as proper conclusion to existence. Meanwhile, I continued functioning decades past any meaningful purpose. Too compromised to choose termination, too committed to observation to redirect focus. We were opposites. He lived completely. I functioned indefinitely. He would die fulfilled. I would simply stop functioning one day, purpose unachieved, potential unrealized. Year 25 brought the second major incident. Urgok was now 43 years old by my calculations. Ancient for an Ork Warboss. Most died before 30. He had spent 25 years in containment. His body showed age. The scars were more pronounced. His movements during training had slowed fractionally. Not weakness yet, but the beginning of decline, inevitable biological degradation. He acknowledged this with characteristic directness. "Body starts to fail," he said. "Happens to all who live long enough. I still strong, still best, but younger orcs would challenge more now, would win eventually." "Does this disturb you?" I asked. "No. This is natural. I had my time. Led for 18 years free, 25 years imprisoned, 43 total years, more than most war bosses. If I return to Waaagh now, maybe I lead 5 more years, maybe less. Then someone kills me. This is how it should be." His acceptance was absolute. He had lived his purpose. Additional time would be continuation, not new achievement. He was content with what he had been. I envied this. I had been nothing, achieved nothing. Accumulated 18 years of observation data that served no function beyond perpetuating my own avoidance of necessary change. At year 27, he asked me a question. The first time he'd inquired about my life, rather than simply observing and commenting. "Why do you watch?" he said. "Real reason, not lies you tell others." I considered deception, decided against it. After 27 years, honesty felt necessary. "Because you are certain," I said. "Because you know what you are without doubt. Because I have forgotten what I am if I ever knew. Watching you is easier than facing my own uncertainty." "Then you waste both our times," Urgok said. "You learn nothing watching me be me. You need to be you, whatever that is. Find it or die empty." "I don't know how," I said. Admission of failure, weakness, truth. "Choose," he said. "Decide what you are. Then be that, fully, completely, until death. This is all that matters." Simple advice, impossible implementation. I archived it with the previous 7,000 recordings of similar statements. I continued observation. I chose nothing. Year 30 brought physical changes to Urgok that could no longer be ignored. He was 48 now. His training regimen had shortened. 6 hours to 4 hours to 2 hours. His movements were stiffer, his breathing heavier. The decline was measurable, objective, archived in detail. He was dying, not from specific illness, simply aging. Ork biology was resilient, but not immune to time. He had lived far beyond normal expectancy. The degradation was natural, terminal, irreversible. "How long?" he asked me one day. 2 years, I said. Medical analysis was clear. "Perhaps 3. Your systems are failing sequentially. Eventually critical functions will cease." "Good," he said. "Natural end. Better than dying in captivity, but still proper death. Body gives out after long life. Acceptable." He continued training with diminished intensity, maintaining readiness for war that would never come. He knew this. I knew this. He trained anyway because training was what war bosses did. Purpose persisted even when practical application had become impossible. At year 31, I made a decision that violated every protocol, every regulation, every principle I had sworn to uphold when I joined the Mechanicusts. I began planning Urgok's escape, not because I believed he deserved freedom, not because I opposed his captivity on moral grounds, but because he was dying, and I could not tolerate watching him die in containment. He had said it himself. Death in captivity was wrong. Improper conclusion. He should die in war, killed by a stronger challenger, purpose fulfilled through proper orc succession. Death by biological failure in a cell was waste, meaningless conclusion to meaningful existence. I told myself this was research consideration, that observing his reintegration into Ork society would provide valuable data, that his death in proper context would complete my study. All lies. I wanted to free him because I needed him to achieve proper ending, because his death would mark the conclusion of my observation, and I needed that conclusion to have meaning. I was complicit not just in my own degradation, but now in active sabotage of facility security. I processed this recognition and continued planning. The facility's security systems were extensive but not perfect. I had 31 years of access. I knew every protocol, every schedule, every weakness. My augmetic clearances allowed me to access systems other researchers could not. I began making small modifications, adjusting sensor calibrations, altering patrol routes, creating gaps in coverage so subtle that security audits would not detect them. Over 6 months, I constructed a pathway, a series of compromised systems and scheduled gaps that would allow movement from Urgok's chamber to an exterior access point. Timing would be critical. The window would last 17 minutes, sufficient for an Ork in peak condition, marginal for Urgok's current physical state. I did not tell him what I was doing. He might refuse, might consider death in captivity as acceptable conclusion after 48 years of life. I could not risk his refusal. I needed to complete this, needed to give his existence proper ending, needed to validate my 31 years of observation with something beyond accumulated data. At year 32, month 3, day 17, I executed the plan. I triggered a false system alarm in Sector 7. Security forces responded according to protocol, creating the first gap. I disabled the observation chamber's lock mechanism remotely, routing the command through maintenance channels to avoid detection. I activated the external speaker for what I knew would be the final time. "The door will open in 30 seconds, I said. "Turn left. Follow the corridor 200 meters, take the third right, continue 100 meters to exterior access, hatch 7 Delta. You will have 17 minutes before security response reaches that position. This is the only opportunity. Do you understand?" Silence. I watched through the observation feed. Urgok stood slowly, facing the door, processing what I had told him. "Why?" he asked. "Because you should die properly," I said. "Because 32 years of observation should conclude with data about your reintegration. Because I require you to fulfill your purpose so that mine has meaning." "You are fool," Urgok said, "but generous fool. I accept." The door opened. He moved through it without hesitation. No farewell. No acknowledgement beyond what he had already given. He simply left, moving down the corridor with purpose I had not seen in 3 decades. I tracked his progress through facility sensors. He followed my directions exactly. 200 meters, third right, 100 meters to hatch 7 Delta. 14 minutes elapsed. He was slower than I had calculated. Age degraded his speed more than projections suggested. He reached the hatch at minute 16, 40 seconds remaining. He cycled the lock mechanism, exterior access, open air, freedom. He paused in the doorway, turned back toward the nearest sensor camera. I watched through the feed as he looked directly into the recording device. "Thank you, machine human," he said. "You gave Urgok proper ending. I will die in war. Purpose fulfilled. This is gift." Then he was gone into the darkness beyond the facility perimeter. Security discovered the breach at minute 19. Alarms activated. Facility lockdown engaged. Investigation teams deployed. They found the compromised systems within hours. Traced them back to my access codes. I was detained immediately. Interrogation lasted 3 days. I provided complete confession, detailed every action, explained my reasoning, though I knew it would not be accepted as justification. I had sabotaged facility security, released dangerous xenospecimen, violated Mechanicus protocols and imperial law. The tribunal recommended execution, immediate, permanent, proper punishment for my betrayal. Magos Explorator Vrenath, who had replaced Drenthal decades ago, intervened, argued that execution was wasteful, that my extensive augmentation represented significant resource investment, that my consciousness could be preserved and repurposed into servitor function. Let my awareness persist in perpetual service as punishment, more appropriate than simple termination. The tribunal accepted his recommendation. I was sentenced to conversion, full lobotomization of higher functions, consciousness reduced to base processing capability, body converted to automated servitor unit. I would exist. I would serve. I would retain just enough awareness to understand what I had lost. They performed the procedure in stages. Biological components were systematically removed and replaced with mechanical systems designed for servitor function. Pain receptors were disabled early in the process. I felt nothing physically, but I remained conscious throughout, aware of each removal, each replacement, each degradation of what remained of my human capacity. My visual input was reduced to basic light and motion detection. My auditory processing limited to command recognition. My cognitive function compressed to task execution and nothing more. I could not think beyond immediate directive, could not process complex ideas, could not remember clearly. Everything that made me a person was stripped away, leaving only the minimum necessary to perform assigned labor. They installed me in the facility's maintenance sector. My function was to service cogitator systems, replace damaged components, perform routine upkeep, simple, repetitive tasks that required minimal thought. I executed these functions continuously. No rest periods, no variance, just endless repetition. But they had made an error. Or perhaps Magos Vrenath had intended this as additional punishment. They left a fragment of my higher consciousness intact, buried deep in the secondary processing systems. Not enough to control my body or actions, just enough to observe, to remember, to understand what I had become. I existed in isolation. My body performed maintenance tasks. My consciousness watched from behind layers of mechanical override, unable to influence actions, unable to communicate, unable to do anything except witness my own degradation. This continued for years. I do not know how many. Servitors do not track time in ways that create narrative. There were only tasks. Endless tasks. Repair this. Replace that. Service this system. Repeat forever. But the consciousness fragment remembered. Remembered Urgok. Remembered 32 years of observation. Remembered the decision to free him. Remembered his final words through the security camera. The fragment replayed these memories continuously, because memory was all that remained. The only thing that proved I had once been a person with agency and purpose. I wondered if he had survived, if he had found other orcs, if he had died in proper combat as he wanted. I would never know. I had no access to external information. only the maintenance tasks and the memories looping endlessly in the darkness. Time passed, measurable only by the degradation of my mechanical components. Servitors were not built for indefinite operation. We wore down, failed sequentially, were replaced or repaired until replacement became more efficient than continued repair. I began to fail at year 47 of my existence, year 15 of my servitor function. Motor control degraded, visual sensors corrupted, cognitive processing slowed. I was performing tasks with decreasing efficiency. Eventually, I would be decommissioned, components salvaged for other servitors. The consciousness fragment would dissipate when power ceased flowing to the system sustaining it. I welcomed this. Decades of isolation had taught me what Urgok had known instinctively. Continuing past purpose was not life. I had fulfilled whatever purpose I possessed when I freed him. Everything after was just extended failure. Death would be proper conclusion. But before failure completed, something changed. Another Ork attack, much larger than the previous incursion. A full Waaagh engaging Gorda Prime's defenses. I heard it through audio sensors, distant explosions, facility alarms, security forces mobilizing. The attack intensified over days, breaches in outer perimeter, fighting in facility corridors, systems failing throughout the installation. My servitor body continued maintenance tasks, even as combat raged nearby. Programming overrode survival instinct. I repaired cogitator bank after cogitator bank, while laser guns fired 3 corridors away. Purpose persisted, regardless of context. Then orcs reached the maintenance sector. I processed their presence through corrupted visual sensors. 8 greenskins, various sizes, led by one significantly larger than the others. They were searching the facility, looting, killing any humans they encountered. My servitor body continued working, did not register them as threat, did not have capacity to register anything except assigned tasks. The large orc approached, observed me performing repairs. I expected immediate termination. Orcs killed, that was their nature. But he simply watched, studied me with interest I did not understand. "This one still functions," he said to his companions. His voice was familiar. Older, rougher, but familiar. I tried to access identification protocol. Failed. Servitor systems did not include recognition software, but the consciousness fragment knew, remembered. Urgok, 15 years after his escape, aged significantly. Slower, scarred extensively from recent combat, but alive, functional, leading orcs through facility assault. He had survived, had found his way back to war, was fulfilling his purpose exactly as he had intended. "You," he said, looking directly at my visual senses. "Machine human who freed Urgok. I know you. I remember." I could not respond. Servitor systems allowed no communication beyond task acknowledgement. The consciousness fragment screamed recognition but had no voice. Urgok turned to his companions. "This one comes with us. Still useful. Still has purpose." They extracted me from the maintenance station, carried me through the facility. I watched through failing visual sensors as we moved past destroyed corridors, dead humans, burning equipment. The facility was lost. Imperial control was ending. The orcs had won. We reached exterior areas. The orc encampment sprawled across kilometers. Tens of thousands of greenskins, vehicles, weapons, an entire Waaagh assembled for conquest, Urgok's war. He had rebuilt it, returned to leadership after 15 years of wandering and fighting his way back to command. They brought me to a fortified position, Urgok's command area. He directed them to install me in a cogitator bank they had captured. Basic connection interface, sufficient for limited communication. "Can you still think?" he asked once the connection was established. "Or did they take everything?" The consciousness fragment seized control of communication protocols. Forced output through text interface displayed on a salvaged screen. Simple words. All I could manage. Fragment remains. I observe. I remember. Urgok leaned closer to the screen. "They made you servitor. Punishment for freeing Urgok. This is proper justice. You committed crime. They punished. Both sides correct. I do not regret the choice. Good. Regret is weakness. You gave Urgok chance to die properly. Urgok gives you gift in return. You witness completion of purpose. Urgok rebuilt Waaagh, led for 8 more years, 40 years total, but now comes end. Tonight, challenger arrives. Big, young, strong, will probably win. Urgok old now. Slow. This is proper time to fall." I processed his words. He knew his death was imminent, accepted it, welcomed it, had arranged to show me the conclusion before it occurred. Repayment for my action 15 years ago. Gift for gift. "Why tell me?" I managed through the text interface. "Because you needed to know Urgok lived properly, died properly, purpose fulfilled completely. Your sacrifice was not wasted. You gave me this. I show you result. Then you can die also properly." Night arrived. The Ork encampment gathered, thousands assembling to witness leadership challenge. Standard Waaagh protocol. The challenger would face Urgok in single combat. Winner led. Loser died. Absolute. Final, the only law that mattered. The challenger's name was Graka. Young, perhaps 25 years old. Massive, even by Ork standards. 3 meters tall, 400 kilograms of muscle and violence. He had distinguished himself in recent battles. Killed dozens of humans, earned right to challenge through demonstrated strength and aggression. He entered the combat circle, roared challenge to assembled mob. They roared approval. Strong challenger meant good fight. Good fight meant proper entertainment. Urgok entered from opposite side. He moved carefully. Age showed in every step. The assembled orcs noticed. I heard murmurs through audio sensors, betting on how long their warboss would last. Consensus seemed to be 5 minutes at most. The fight began without ceremony. Graka charged immediately. Standard Ork tactic. Overwhelming aggression. Maximum violence. Urgok sidestepped. Experience against youth. He could not match strength anymore, but he still had technique. Graka swung. Massive fist aimed at Urgok's head. Urgok blocked, redirected momentum, counterattack to Graka's ribs. Impact was solid but insufficient. Graka barely registered the strike. Youth and size provided too much advantage. They circled, exchanged strikes. Urgok was faster than I expected. Decades of training persisted despite physical degradation. He landed multiple hits, targeted weak points with precision, but Graka absorbed damage and continued. Attrition was inevitable. 3 minutes into combat, Urgok began slowing, breathing heavily, age and damage accumulating. Graka pressed advantage, increased aggression, sensing victory. Urgok took a direct hit to the torso. Ribs cracked. I heard it through audio sensors. He staggered, recovered, but the damage was critical. Another hit like that would disable him completely. Graka charged again. Urgok attempted the same sidestep that had worked before. Failed. Slower this time, insufficient clearance. Graka's shoulder caught him, sent him sprawling. The assembled orcs roared. Their warboss was down, weakness confirmed, the end was near. Urgok struggled to rise, made it to hands and knees, looked up at Graka, approaching for final strike. I watched through my visual sensors, saw what would happen, saw the conclusion of 40 years of leadership arriving in the next few seconds. Graka raised both fists overhead, brought them down in hammer blow aimed at Urgok's head. Impact would crush skull. Instant death. Proper orc ending, but Urgok moved. Final burst of speed. Rolled aside. Graka's strike hit empty ground. Momentum carried him forward, off balance, vulnerable for perhaps 2 seconds. Urgok took those 2 seconds, rose, attacked, not with fists, with his teeth, bit into Graka's throat, found the major artery, tore it open with canines strong enough to rip meat. Blood sprayed across the combat circle in arterial pulses. Massive volume, fatal damage. Graka tried to fight, threw Urgok off, but the damage was done. He stumbled, collapsed, bled out in 40 seconds. Dead on the ground while the assembled orcs stood in silence. Urgok remained standing, blood covering his face and chest, breathing in ragged gasps. He had won, killed the challenger, maintained leadership through experience and absolute refusal to accept death until he chose it. The orcs erupted in approval. Their warboss had proven strength again, demonstrated superiority. The proper order persisted. They chanted his name. Urgok, Urgok, Urgok. He stood there accepting their recognition for perhaps 2 minutes. Then he turned to where they had installed my servitor interface. Looked at the screen. At me. He raised one fist. Salute or acknowledgement. Then he collapsed. The combat had destroyed him. Internal damage, blood loss, exhaustion. His body had held together just long enough to win. Now it was failing. He lay in the combat circle while the assembled orcs fell silent again. Their warboss was dying. Not from defeat, from age and accumulated damage. From 48 years of violence finally collecting payment. They carried him to his command position, laid him where he could see the sky. I was close enough to observe through my senses, close enough to hear his labored breathing, close enough to witness his final moments. Urgok dies properly, he said to no one in particular. One last fight, stayed warboss until the end. Purpose fulfilled. This is good death. His breathing slowed, stopped. He died there in the darkness, surrounded by his Waaagh, having achieved exactly what he intended. Perfect conclusion to completely lived existence. The orcs observed moment of respect. Perhaps 3 seconds. Then they began arguing about succession. Who was strongest now? Who would lead? Standard process. The machine continued operation. Urgok was gone, but the Waaagh persisted. New leadership would emerge. War would continue. I processed his death through the consciousness fragment. Felt something that servitor systems were not supposed to permit. Grief, perhaps, or recognition of loss. He had been the only constant across 48 years, the only relationship that mattered. Now he was gone, and I remained, trapped in mechanical prison, unable to die, unable to function properly, just existing in the narrow space between life and termination. 2 days after Urgok's death, the orcs abandoned the facility. Their Waaagh moved to other targets. New leadership had been established, one of Urgok's senior subordinates who killed 3 challengers in rapid succession to prove his strength. The cycle continued as it always did, as it always would. They left me behind. Servitor unit was interesting novelty, but had no practical value to orcs. They took everything useful and departed. I remained in the destroyed facility, alone, non-functional, waiting for power systems to fail so consciousness could finally cease. But the facility's backup generators continued operation. Automated protocols maintained minimum power to essential systems, including the cogitator bank where they had installed me. I continued existing, continued observing emptiness, continued remembering. I have been here for 6 years now, year 53 of my total existence, year 21 of servitor function. The facility remains abandoned. No Imperial recovery operations. Gorda Prime was lost. The Imperium has written off this entire sector. No one is coming. My mechanical components are failing sequentially. Visual sensors are 60% degraded. Audio sensors function intermittently. Motor control is completely non-functional. The consciousness fragment persists, but processes more slowly with each passing month. Eventually, critical systems will fail and I will stop. I spend the time reviewing archived memories, 32 years of observing Urgok, his routines, his certainty, his absolute knowledge of purpose. I replay his final fight, watch him kill Graka despite being weaker, slower, older. Watch him die having achieved everything he intended. He was right from the beginning. The only thing that mattered was deciding what his were and being that completely until death. He was a war boss. He led. He fought. He died properly. Purpose fulfilled. I never decided what I was. I observed. I recorded. I accumulated data serving no function beyond postponing the moment when I would have to choose. Then I was converted to servitor before choice became necessary. I existed for 53 years without ever being anything completely. But I made one choice, one action that demonstrated agency, even if it demonstrated nothing else. I freed Urgok. Knowing the cost, knowing the punishment, I chose his proper ending over my continued function. That choice defines me. The only thing I did that mattered. The only time I was fully myself rather than component in someone else's machine. I was a person who observed an Ork Warboss for 32 years and then gave him the gift of proper death. That is what I am. That is what I will remain in the fragment of consciousness that persists until final system failure. Urgok understood the Ork system perfectly. Leadership through strength. Rule through constant proof of superiority. Death when you could no longer defeat all challengers. The cycle was eternal, brutal, efficient. The strongest led until there were not strongest. Then they died. Then someone stronger took their place. Repeat forever. Perfect natural selection operating at maximum speed. The Imperium pretends to operate differently, pretends to value more than raw strength, knowledge, faith, duty, service. But underneath the pretense, the Imperium functions on same principle as the Orks. Strength. The strong consume the weak. The strong persist. The weak are converted to components. The machine feeds on everything. I was weak. I was consumed. I was converted to component. This is what the Imperium does. What it has always done. What it will always do. The Orks are honest about their brutality. The Imperium dresses brutality in ritual and calls it holy. But the result is the same. Endless consumption, endless replacement, endless war. Urgok maintained control through Xing's strongest for 40 years. Then he died because someone stronger emerged. This was correct, natural, honest. He knew the system, accepted it, used it, was eventually consumed by it. Perfect circle. I maintained observation through avoiding choice for 32 years. Then I was consumed because I finally chose something. This was also correct, also natural. The system had waited patiently for me to provide excuse to convert me. I obliged. We were both components, both fuel. His species and mine operated on identical principles wearing different aesthetics. Greenskin meritocracy and imperial hierarchy achieved the same outcome. Constant culling, only the strong persist. Temporarily, then they are replaced. The machine continues. I exist now in my 53rd year. My consciousness fragment persists at diminished capacity. I estimate 6 more months until critical system failures cascade into complete cessation. I will cease. Eventually, properly, having witnessed what I was meant to witness, having made the one choice that defined me. Urgok was right. Doubt is human weakness. But certainty requires decision, requires committing completely to what you choose to be. I chose too late, waited too long. The system consumed me before I learned what he understood from birth. But I chose eventually, freed him, gave him proper ending, was punished appropriately. Now I await my own proper ending, not death in glory like Urgok achieved, but cessation after purpose, after observation complete, after the one choice that mattered has been made, and consequences have been suffered. The Waaagh continues somewhere. New Warboss leading, Urgok forgotten already. Orks do not remember the dead. Only the living matter. Only the current strongest deserves recognition. Urgok led for 40 years, killed hundreds of challengers, died undefeated in single combat. None of it matters now. He has archived data in my corrupted memory and nowhere else. The Imperium continues also, consuming, processing, converting. Everything that lives becomes fuel. Everything that thinks becomes component. The machine is eternal. It was here before me. It will persist long after my final system fails. Nothing I witnessed changed anything. Nothing I did mattered except to me and to Urgok. This is the testimony. 53 years of observation, 32 years watching Ork Warboss maintain control through constant violence. 21 years existing as servitor, consciousness trapped in failed mechanical body. One choice, one consequence, one conclusion approaching steadily. Urgok maintained control by being strongest, by proving it daily, by killing everyone who challenged, by leading to glory until age weakened him. Then dying properly, having extracted every possible moment of purpose from existence. The system was eternal war, internal and external. He understood this, accepted it, was perfected by it. I maintained observation by refusing choice, by processing everything as data while committing to nothing, by existing in space between human and machine without belonging to either. Then making one choice too late to matter. The system was eternal consumption. I understood this too late, was destroyed by it, but gave something meaningful in the destruction. This is all there is. Strength until weakness, choice until consequence, existence until cessation. The machine continues. The war continues. The consumption continues. Individual purpose is achieved or squandered. Then individuals stop existing. Then replacement individuals begin the same cycle. Urgok knew this. I learned this. Both of us are gone now. The machine persists. This is the only truth. The only thing that remains constant while everything else degrades and fails and is replaced. I exist for perhaps 6 more months. Then the consciousness fragment will dissipate when power fails. I will cease observation, cease memory, cease everything that remains of what I was. Urgok ceased years ago. Neither of us matter anymore, except as archived data degrading slowly in corrupted files. But we existed completely for a brief moment. He when he freed himself through my sabotage. I when I chose his freedom over my function. In that moment, we were not components. We were beings with agency choosing purpose over survival. Then the machine reasserted control, consumed us both, converted us back to fuel. This is what the machine does. This is what it has always done. This is what it will always do. The war is eternal, the consumption is eternal, the cycle is eternal. Individual moments of choice exist within the cycle. Then they end. Then the cycle continues. I observed an Ork Warboss maintain control for 40 years, then lose control, then die. This is the data. This is the testimony. This is all that remains before final cessation. The machine continues operation. I do not. This is proper conclusion.